Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, November 5th. We have a big show for you, a big day in sports, especially around the NFL. Week 9 officially wrapped up last night. We'll go over our winners and losers from it, including a crazy Monday Night Football. We have our power rankings, as always, 32-1 coming up later. And of course, the NFL trade deadline has come and gone as of just an hour ago. The teams are all but set now. We take a look at some of the biggest moves that happened all day today and over the course of the entirety of the football season. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, November 5th. But like I was saying, we're going to start off our show today with the biggest story in the NFL, the NFL trade deadline. Throughout the course of the NFL season so far, and up until the deadline an hour ago, there have been 18 trades taking place. Some of them have been big. We talked about a lot of those wide receiver ones that took place earlier on in the season. Some of them a little bit smaller, but a couple of big ones that took place today. Starting off with the biggest one, arguably, where Marshawn Lattimore, someone who'd been in trade talks for a while, finally moved to Washington. A big move. Washington, obviously a team that is on the rise. They have their best record in years. Jaden Daniels, still a rookie, looks like he's on path to have an amazing career down there in the capital. This is going to be This is a huge move for them. Again, they are a team that has one of the worst secondaries in the entire league. Getting a 4-time All-Pro player in Marshawn Lattimore to go and shore up the corner. While that defense has been playing better than it was in the beginning of the season, they've kind of sacrificed a little bit of their identity in the run game in order to protect the pass. They've gone more into quarters looks, some more coverage downs, leaving the box a little more empty, and teams have been running up and down on them. This should help them. They finally have a shutdown corner with a little bit of leverage, a little bit of time left on his contract. This is a big move for the Commanders, and it's their first real big splash as contenders as we take a look at them. The other big move that took place today has to do with the Packers. They trade Preston Smith. Not really a team that I had marked as a team that was going to trade players. Preston Smith traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's having a bit of a down season, but when he's on, him and Zadarius Smith, who also got traded today to Detroit, both of them can be elite pass rushers. Detroit, obviously a team that had kept their eyes on a pass rusher all season long since they lost Aiden Hutchinson. They go out and they get Zadarius Smith for cheap, a guy who from the Browns was pretty obviously on the trade market. You'd think they'd get more for him, more than just a late round pick, but they get peanuts for him, and Detroit gets a pass rusher that can change things. Again, this is a Detroit team that has very few weaknesses, especially when they had, an elite pass rusher, an elite pass rushing unit that kind of went downhill a little bit when Aiden Hutchinson went down early on in the season. They've been able to survive that, but whenever you can get some help with the pass rush, that's going to help a defense that has been a little bit underwhelming as of late. They played a great game against the Packers, but outside of that, they'd been prone to giving up some big points totals to some of the teams that they had played. Mike Williams, also among those getting traded today. The former Jets receiver who had come over in the offseason after being cut from the Chargers had his issues with Aaron Rodgers. He gets traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is one of those moves that feels like it's probably where he should have gone from the beginning. He was supposed to meet with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the offseason to decide if he was going to go sign with them. The Steelers, who have a very weak receiving core outside of George Pickens, there's not really anybody anybody else that you feel comfortable throwing the ball to. Calvin Austin has had a couple of good weeks these last few weeks. Russell Wilson has really helped explore that offensive explosiveness just a little bit more than Justin Fields was. The running game's been doing better, but adding Mike Williams kind of adds a second George Pickens. You have George Pickens, who is one of the best contested ball receivers in the entire NFL right now. You go out and you get Mike Williams, whose main specialty is that jump ball. Again, kind of contested ball. If you can just throw it up to him, he'll win a lot of those 50-50 balls. Now they have one of those guys on each of the sidelines. That's not something that's going to be easy to defend. Mike Williams not having his best season. He's obviously had his fair share of issues with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. It hasn't really worked out. He's coming off of a couple of injuries. This is a guy that, you hope can improve from where he's been this season. But among a honestly quiet day, these were some of the bigger moves. Some other housekeeping stuffs to take a look at here. Khalil Herbert traded to the Bengals after Zach Moss goes on IR. Seems like he's going to be out for an extended period of time. They go and they get Khalil Herbert, a guy who lost basically all of his touches on the Bears to Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. He goes out there, a cheap trade, but they need a running back, Cincinnati does, next to Chase Brown, who, while he's done a really good job taking over that starting role from Zach Moss, he's not a guy that you want to be getting 20, 30 carries a game. Not someone that I think is really built for that. You don't really want a running back to have a career where they're getting 30 carries a game. They're not really built for that kind of longevity anymore. It's not something that's normal. But I think of the 18 moves, we have to go back to some of the early season moves to see which ones are the most effective. And right now, if I had to just take a screenshot from the outside and say which one of these moves is going to have the biggest effect on the season, I'd say it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins, in his second game with the Chiefs, came out and really showed why he is DeAndre Hopkins. I know that's something that people were expecting out of him a little bit, but he goes out and dominates. He absolutely tears up the zone coverage, makes a couple of incredible catches, 2 touchdowns in that game, and that passing offense looks incredibly different with a real wide receiver 1 in there, something that they've been missing for a while. He doesn't have that same explosiveness off the snap that he had in his younger days with the Texans and with the Cardinals, but he's still a guy that, you throw him up the ball, he's going to come down with it more often than not, and that's exactly what Patrick Mahomes needed. He did not have that guy before, especially after Rashee Rice went down. This was honestly a more quiet trade deadline than I was expecting. There's a couple guys, or I should say there's one guy that I was really expecting to get moved that did not get moved, that being Azeez Ojulari from the New York Giants, a pass rusher who's having maybe his best season ever, second best in terms of sack totals, and we're only halfway through the season. He's really come on early on this season. That's a guy that I expected to get moved. Maybe the asking price was too high. Maybe the Giants decided that they were going to re-sign him at the end of the season and it wasn't worth trading. But it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on, what happens with Azeez Ojulari in free agency after the season is done, because he's a guy that I for sure thought was going to be on a different team after this deadline. And then the Cowboys. Before we head out, we have to talk about the Cowboys, of course. They were a team that was supposed to make a super big move, right? Jerry Jones came out and he says they need to make a big move at the deadline in his radio spot after Dak Prescott goes down with a hamstring injury. He's on the IR. This is a team that is in trouble, and what do? They go out and they get Jonathan Mingo. Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers. They give up a lot for him. They give up more for him than they did, than the Panthers got for Deontay Johnson. Jonathan Mingo is not that level of receiver. Deontay Johnson is a guy that I think could help elevate things. Jonathan Mingo is a guy that has not proven any ability in the NFL yet. He's a young receiver still on a rookie deal, and the Cowboys desperately need another receiver across from CeeDee Lamb. But if you wanted someone like that, there's a bunch of other options still out there. You could have gone out, you could have gotten a Darius Slayton from the Giants. You could have gone out there and you could have gotten any number of receivers that were out there. Mike Williams was available. Obviously, he went and got traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that wasn't a price that really was that much to give up. KJ Osborne, I think, would be a better fit down there for the Cowboys that you could have gotten instead of him. Maybe you go out and you get Tyler Boyd. These were options that were out there. Adam Thielen was another option on that same team, a guy that I think would have made a bigger difference on the Cowboys. But there is upside with Jonathan Mingo, and maybe the Cowboys really believe in him. I'm not there to stop them if they really think that that is the right decision. It's not what I would have done, but Jerry Jones has made a lot of head-scratching decisions in this last year. We'll see if it works out. I'm not saying it won't, but we'll see. But we're going to take a quick break here. After that trade deadline, we have some winners and losers. We're going to start off with our winners and losers coming up next for a wild week in the NFL here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, November 5th. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the trade deadline. A pretty lax trade deadline, honestly. Not very many big moves on this day. Marshawn Lattimore was moved. Both Preston and Zadarius Smith were moved, but outside of that, not too much happened. Most of the moves coming earlier in the season. In this segment, we turn our attention to Week 9 in the NFL. From over the weekend and on Monday, we have winners and losers. We're going to start off with our winners in just 1 second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to talk about, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, November 5th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into winners and losers from a Week 9 that kind of had a lot of crazy turns in it. Starting off with our winners here at number 5. As always, every week we do our 5 winners and 5 losers. We're going to start off with our winners. Number 5, it's the San Francisco 49ers. And the 49ers get on the winners list for one reason and one reason alone. It's the fact that Christian McCaffrey is coming back to practice. The 49ers have survived without him. It has not been easy. This is a 49ers team that was supposed to be the dominant force coming out of the NFC. They are not first place in their division, but they are real close. It is going to be a dogfight down the stretch in the NFC West, with the Rams on a 3-game winning streak. The Cardinals on top of that division. The Seahawks, who were on top for a while, still in the race there. Every team in that division has 4 or 5 losses and is still a serious threat to win that division, so no one can let off the gas pedal yet. The 49ers have survived and are in good enough position to make a run this season with Christian McCaffrey coming back, presumably this week. That is the biggest get you can get at the deadline, we'll say. And they've done just enough to stay in it. The 49ers are the number 5 winner of the week. Staying in the NFC West for our number 4 winner, it's the Rams. They were a team that was on the block. They thought they were going to sell off some assets. Cooper Kupp's name was being thrown around about the time of the big wide receiver trades earlier this season. They have now won 3 straight, are tied for second place in that division, and are right behind in striking distance of the Arizona Cardinals, are only up on them by half a game. This is a team that is hotter than anybody else in the NFL right now. The way they're playing now that they've got all of their weapons, the defense especially has been super, super impressive. Trey White gets traded away. He wasn't very happy with LA. That's not a big deal. He's not a guy that was getting very serious amounts of minutes anyway on that team. This is a Rams squad that is only improving, and they have a track. They have a pretty easy track to the playoffs. You take a look at the rest of their schedule. It is not the hardest thing in the world when we talk about, schedules in general. Now, there's a lot of different ways that this could go. Obviously, the 49ers get back Christian McCaffrey. We were just talking about that. But down the stretch here for the Rams, they get the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Saints, the Jets, the Cardinals, and a couple division games. Also the Bills and the Eagles, but that's not a hard schedule. That's a schedule that you can look at and say they can continue to go on a bit of a run here. I don't think they're going to win out this season, but this is a schedule where maybe you only see them losing 2 more games, 3 more games, give them a division loss in there, end up finishing the season with 10 wins and in a playoff spot. This is a Rams team that is primed, ready to go, and is getting healthier as more and more teams get more injured. And this is a good spot to be right now. Taking us in to our number 3 winner of the week, we can't ignore it, Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley pulled off the most incredible things, one of the most incredible things you could possibly do on a football field this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not only is Saquon Barkley continuing to do Saquon Barkley level things, but he also hurdled someone backwards. He catches the ball out in the flat on a third down, a big third down play, breaks a tackle, spins off another guy directly into a backwards hurdle. You've seen this play over and over again if you're anywhere on the NFL internet, if you're anywhere a part of the NFL community. This is something you have seen, and it's one of the more beautiful things that has ever happened on a football field. He's tried this before in a game. It did not work. He goes out, tries it again, is fearless, gets over the Jacksonville defender, lands and is ready to go, gets tackled, but he could have kept going if no one was there to catch up to him. That was a beautiful play, and Saquon Barkley, for that play alone, gets the number 3 winner of the week. Our number 2 winner of the week, we kind of talked a little bit about it in our first segment, but our number 2 winner of the week is DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins gets traded out of the Tennessee Titans, a contender for the worst team in the NFL, a team that barely escapes with a victory over the Patriots. Both of those teams toilet bowl of the league right now, trying desperately for that first overall pick, at least. That's the direction they're heading in. Gets freed to the Kansas City Chiefs, where immediately he gets an incredible connection, a great chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, and now is closer to winning a Super Bowl than he ever has in his entire career. He's been on some solid teams. Some of those Texans teams he was on were really good. Some of those Arizona Cardinals teams he was on were really good. He had the longest undefeated streak at one point when he was on the Cardinals, and now he goes to the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions, a team that has not lost since Christmas. Literally has not lost since Christmas. He is in an excellent spot, and he makes that Chiefs team immediately 20, 30 times better than they were. You see his impact. They do not win that game on Monday without DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins and the Chiefs are the number 2 winner of the week, and that leads us to number 1. The number 1 winner of the week, Bryce Young. How about Bryce Young? Gets a second opportunity to start in the league. He goes out there and he gets a big win against a division opponent. I know it's the Saints, and I know they're really a dumpster fire of an organization over there. We'll talk about that in a second. But Bryce Young, what he's been able to do, his mental fortitude to get through that, come out and be, quite honestly, a better player than he was at the beginning of the season. He comes out like he's playing for his job, because he is. Bryce Young goes out there and raises questions. Is he getting his job back? Andy Dalton expected to be healthy after this week. Now there's a real question for Dave Canales. There were some mistakes there, but he was dropping dimes. He was making the right decision a lot of the time. He was still doing the same kind of mistakes, bailing from empty pockets, but he finally gets a win. And when you watch him smiling from ear to ear after a win in the NFL, something that's come so rare to him after winning consistently in college with Alabama, that is something that it's just good for the NFL. We've had lots and lots of issues with mismanagement of young quarterbacks, of second-year quarterbacks, especially this year with both Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson. To see Bryce Young out there winning games is maybe the best thing that could have happened. He is the winner of this week in the NFL. Congratulations, Bryce Young and the Panthers. But let me know who you think. Who was the biggest winner of the week this week? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we do the other side, the biggest losers, the top 5 biggest losers of the week, coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, November 5th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the winners of the Week 9 NFL season. It was a wild week in the NFL, and with the winners, we have to balance it out with the losers. We have the top 5 biggest losers of the week coming up in just 1 second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, November 5th. But like I was saying, we're getting into the biggest losers from Week 9 of the NFL season. As always, we've picked out 5. At number 5, very simply, it's the overtime rules. We've seen 2 overtime games this week, one of them in the spotlight on Monday Night Football, a couple of decisions, 3 overtime games this week. I forgot about that Titans game real quick, but we had 3 overtime games this week. The most overtimes in a week all season, and the overtime rules for 2 of them didn't really come into huge effect. There were field goals or punts/turnovers on each of those that led to the other team getting an opportunity. But as always with the Chiefs, once again, there was not an opportunity for the other team to get a possession. And I think that's the biggest issue with the NFL right now. You take a look at college overtime rules, and as much as I have gripes with it, as other people have gripes with it, maybe you don't start from the 30-yard line, you do a full drive. At least the other team gets a fair possession. Both teams get a possession, get a chance to answer back instead of it coming up to a coin flip. And I know that they fixed it in the playoffs. I love that they fixed it in the playoffs. That's a great thing. They fixed it in the playoffs. Why not do that in the regular season? There's no reason to hold just the right answer to just the playoffs. If you have a format that you think works, why not put it throughout the whole season? This is a very simple fix. You don't have to do anything other than let the other team answer. It's not that big a deal. It really isn't. You can borrow from college football. You don't have to start them on the 30-yard line, but let the other team get at least one possession. I think that's more than fair. When these games go to overtime, we're asking for good football. There's generally good football, and it happened again on Monday night. There was some really good football by both sides, and the Chiefs won the coin toss. They drove down the field as we expect the Chiefs to do, and the Bucs were just left sitting on their hands on the sideline. Baker Mayfield not getting a chance to answer after driving down and forcing overtime. It's just a mess of a rule right there, and I think it needs to change. That's the number 5 loser. Our number 4 loser of the week goes to the 2-win teams. As we stand right now, there are 9, count them, 9 teams in the NFL with 2 losses. Halfway through the season, 9 of the 32 teams in the NFL have 2 wins. That's it. They're all competing for this number 1 spot right now, and usually at this point, we have a couple of clear favorites, some really, really bad teams at the bottom, but right now, the teams at the bottom just keep being bad. And as good as much as it sucks to be bad, as much as it sucks to be that bad, 2 wins through 9 weeks, generally there's some silver lining. Generally, there's something out there saying, hey, you know what? We are going to at least get a top pick, a top 5 pick, something along those lines. But now they're not even convinced they're going to get a top 10 pick. And that is the worst of both worlds. To get a middling pick after having a brutal season, like a couple of these current 2-win teams are going to go through, it is not a good look for these teams. It is not a fun time to be a part of these teams, and I am not jealous at all for how they feel. 9 teams in that spotlight. If you extend it to 3 wins, we're into double digits there, and that's just no good. You have to have some silver lining for some bad teams there. The NFL is very much losing its middle class right now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does suck for these bad teams and these fans of bad teams that are looking for something to look forward to after the season is done. Our number 3 loser of the week goes to the Indianapolis Colts. They made the boneheaded decision to switch quarterbacks, to give up on their known project quarterback, Anthony Richardson, just 10 games into his NFL career. Switch over to Joe Flacco. And, I thought it was dumb. Obviously, I've gotten on a soapbox and talked about that all of last week. That's besides the point. Here, what we're focusing on is the fact that, while I thought it might help them win now, that did not work. They looked worse than they ever have all season offensively. Joe Flacco struggling to complete passes, and I know it's against a good defense in the Vikings, a Vikings team that plays with crazy pressures. Brian Flores, one of the most creative defensive minds in the NFL nowadays. It's not an easy situation to come in, but Joe Flacco is a veteran. He's supposed to know when to make these easy plays that'll help them win that Anthony Richardson was not taking. There were on multiple occasions, you get that gunslinger Joe Flacco back when you just need 2 yards, and it costs them any it costs them any chance at competing in this game. You needed a win badly, which is why you went out and made this decision, and that offense looks worse. There were times when I was watching that Sunday night football game that I was thinking you should put Anthony Richardson back in. But now the question is it even possible to put Anthony Richardson back in? Is it something you can do looking at what you have done, the fractured relationship with him, with the receivers, with the locker room? How can you put Anthony Richardson back in the game and not ruin any chance of success? Is he going to get another chance to start? Have the Colts given up on him completely? Right now, they have put themselves in this mess. There's a difference between a Browns mess with Deshaun Watson, where, sure, they gave him the contract, but, they didn't really coach themselves into this mess. That's a front office GM decision, and that's part of it, whatever. It's not like the Saints, where they didn't coach themselves into this mess. They slowly got themselves into this mess. This is a solely your fault. Shane Steichen made this mess. He is going to have to live with it. I don't know how he's going to fix it. I don't know what the answer is, but right now, I think they need Anthony Richardson back out there if you're going to lose games. And they're going to lose games. Get your project quarterback some starts. It really is that simple. Give him a shot. He needs a shot to develop, and he's not going to develop from the bench. As much as people want him to develop from the bench, he's a guy whose biggest problem is accuracy, and he's not going to get any more accurate sitting on the bench. He's not going to get any more accurate not playing with the ones when they do practice. He's not going to get any more accurate like that. He's not going to make the better decisions like that. That is not something that fixes itself until he gets in the game. And they need to make that change now. They've gotten themselves in an unarguably awful position, and the Colts are a number 3 loser of the week. Sticking along those same lines, our number 2 loser of the week goes to the Chicago Bears. This is now 2 weeks in a row where we've had players give up on plays, not be ready for plays. DJ Moore is the culprit this week. Early on in the first quarter, 4 minutes have gone past in this whole game, and DJ Moore walks off halfway through a play. I know he can't touch the ball. I know he can't. He steps out of bounds. He's not allowed to touch it, but Caleb Williams is scrambling. He has played with low intensity, low effort through a lot of these plays. DJ Moore coming out there and just walking out of the game a week after Tyreek Stevenson, who was benched for this game and kind of walked out of the Bears facility after that. This is a Bears team that now week over week over week has become more and more of a dumpster fire. This is a Bears team that was on an upward trajectory. They were winning games, and then one mistake compounds to another. Bad coaching decisions ruins a locker room. This is how you become a bad football team. This is how you stay a bad football team. They are on the up and up. And I think Matt Eberflus has just made decisions, and he's lost the locker room, and he should be out of a job by the end of this season. Him and the offensive coordinator. And that leads us to number 1. Our number 1 loser of the week, of course, goes to the Saints. We talk about awful locker room situations, and that's what it is for these 3-2 losers, but none are more toxic than the Saints. It's not just in the locker room, it's outside of the locker room. Brothers of players, former teammates. Michael Thomas coming to Twitter saying this is all Derek Carr's fault. Not a good look. Dennis Allen, their head coach, gets fired. About time for that. This is a team that I've been talking about for a while as one that's going to run into cap trouble, right? They're a team that's been pushing it off forever. They've been saying, oh, we can deal with it later. They're messing with the cap, doing the cap shenanigans. And this is a lesson for all these teams that are doing these cap shenanigans, that are pushing this money further and further down the line to ignore it. They have hit the wall. It is time to pay the piper for the Saints, and they are going to be in a dark place for a long time. They have no future. They have no money to get out of it. The only way out of this is to draft incredibly. And the Saints don't have a great history of drafting great. They have holes everywhere. They don't have the money to fix that in free agency. They're paying a lot of money to some players that are not on teams anymore. And all of that guaranteed money, it's coming up now. They are a team that is in the worst financial situation in the league, worse than the Browns, with just one contract, and there is no easy way out of it. The Saints are the biggest losers of the week, not just because you have players publicly apologizing on Twitter for losing a game, but because this team's future is nothing. They have come up, they have to pay what they've been waiting on for years and years and years, and hopefully other teams learn from this, because this is not a situation you want to be in. The Saints are the number 1 loser of the week, but let me know what you thought. Who is the biggest loser of the week? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the power rankings. Week 10 power rankings coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, November 5th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the winners and losers for the Week 9 NFL season. In this segment, it is Rankings Tuesday. We turn our attention to the power rankings in the NFL. We have, of course, as always, our 32-17 coming up in this segment and 16-1 coming up after that. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, November 5th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we turn our attention to the NFL Power Rankings. Ranks 32-17. Starting off at number 32, it is those New Orleans Saints, the biggest losers of the week. They are the second team to fire their head coach. Dennis Allen out, and like we talked about, their future is in trouble. This is a team that has absolutely no future. The Saints at the bottom of the league. They've lost now 7 straight, including a loss to the Carolina Panthers, the team that they beat most recently all the way back in week 2 when they were all the way up at 5. Egg on my face for that one. This was a Saints team that I was completely wrong on, and they are deep in the pit of awfulness in the NFL. The Saints are number 32, and they have a doozy of a way to climb back out of it. At 31, it's the Las Vegas Raiders, the other team that made some coaching moves. They fire offensive coordinator Luke Getsy after this offense just continues to be stuck in the mud. Gardner Minshew benched for Desmond Ridder, not a name that I expected to get any kind of starting job after last season in Atlanta, but he gets another chance. New coaches come in. This is not an easy fix for the Raiders. That everything about that team is really, really bad. But the Raiders at 31, they're not the worst team in the league, and that's all you can ask for right now for a Raiders team that's very broken. At 30, it's the Carolina Panthers. They make a couple of moves. Bryce Young looking better. There's some positives with this team. This is a team that's slowly on the rise. They're still not there. It's still a very bad unit, especially defensively. They have their issues, but this is a team where you can see a little bit of the light. Xavier Legette coming out there, making a couple of big plays, not a perfect game for him. That's not what you expect, but this is the Panthers team that I think in a couple of years could be competing for a division title if everything continues to go right. At 29, it's the New England Patriots. The Patriots escape or almost get a win there. Drake May played really, really good football, especially down the stretch to get them into overtime, making a couple of really good plays. I knew he throws an interception that ultimately ends the game, but that play from Drake May to send them to overtime, holding the ball for almost 12 whole seconds, scrambling around, breaking tackles, getting hit and lofting a ball into the end zone to hit a receiver that's open. That was one of the athletic plays that you see out of a quarterback. It's not like he's making a Lamar Jackson kind of play, but that is what you look for at a young quarterback, extending the play in a must-have-it situation and getting it done. That is the clutch gene right there, and the Patriots have a lot to look forward to as he continues to grow in this league. At 28 is the Tennessee Titans. They barely escape with a win against those New England Patriots. Mason Rudolph plays a fine game of football. This is an interesting situation in Tennessee. That defense is one that I certainly do believe in. They have a lot of talent over there, but they have a lot of other issues there. This is a team that is going to struggle to win games as long as the offense plays as poorly as it does, as consistently as it does. This is a bad Titans team, but they can beat up on the bad teams. So they're number 28. At 27, it's the Giants. Daniel Jones breaks his curse of almost 2 years, finally throws a touchdown pass at home to Chris Manhertz, finishes with 0 yards in the first half, but they almost came back against the Washington Commanders. He played a good game. Tyrone Tracy seems to be a good talent that they found. in the 5th round of this draft out of Purdue. This is the Giants team that has a lot of rookies playing some good ball. Theo Johnson caught a touchdown in this one, the rookie tight end. You have a lot of positives on this Giants team. That defense, again, playing really good football, especially against the pass. They're not a good team, but you can kind of see the vision just a little bit. You can kind of see the vision. The Giants at 27. At 26, it's the Colts. We just went on and on in our last segment about how the Colts are one of the biggest losers of the week. They completely botched the quarterback situation, and this is a team that has upside. You saw how good that defense played, forcing plenty of turnovers of Sam Darnold, a guy whose main calling card this season had been keeping the ball clean. They kept them in the game. They end up scoring a touchdown, a defensive touchdown in this one. That was a huge moment for them. The Colts are a team that need a lot of work, but they're not out of it yet. I don't know how they're going to fix this issue, but Joe Flacco could play better than that in most games. I don't know what their plan is in the future. It's not going to be an easy fix, though. They're down to 26. At 25, it's the Cowboys. Dak Prescott on IR with a hamstring injury. They didn't make any big moves at the deadline. CeeDee Lamb a little bit banged up, expected to play, though. This is a team that has just been maybe the most disappointing team in the entire NFL. CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott were supposed to come out there and dominate like they did last season. Whatever magical powers is gone. They don't have any semblance of a running game. Their defense, awful. Went from one of the better defensive units in all of football last year to one of the worst this season, and that is the biggest difference. They were supposed to run it back, build off the success. None of that is happening now. The Dallas Cowboys at number 25. At 24, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They showed you some good things. I know they just got humiliated by Saquon Barkley in that game, but I really did like some of the things, especially down the stretch from the Jags. The defense stepped up huge in that second half, really slowed down the Eagles, who kind of shot themselves in the foot, making a couple of bad coaching decisions. Nick Sirianni, obviously not the greatest decision maker, lots of risks, not a big fan of what he does over there. But the Jags, to their credit, were able to claw all the way back, make it a one-possession game before ultimately not coming through in the clutch. Brian Robinson continues to play really, really good football. This is a team that, if they just get a couple more breaks to go their way, and I know they got a lot in that game to keep it close, this is a team that I could see flipping a couple of games that they've played so far to wins. The Browns at 23. It's the Jameis Winston experience. Welcome to it, ladies and gentlemen. Jameis Winston, 3 touchdowns in his first game, 3 interceptions in his second game. This is what you're going to get out of Jameis Winston. You don't know if it's going to be good Jameis or bad Jameis, and you just got to live with the results. The Cleveland Browns are a team that are just going to hang out around here. They're not really going to push too far. They're preparing for the future. They're going to try and deal with that Deshaun Watson contract. But Jameis Winston is a guy that'll provide excitement, but also will make his fair share of mistakes. And we got a bad Jameis Winston game. You're going to get a couple of those to go with the good. At 22, it's the Miami Dolphins. They've played really good football since Tua's come back. They've lost back-to-back weeks on walk-off field goal. This one stings. They probably should have sent this to overtime if not for a Jordan Poyer unnecessary roughness penalty. Ends up setting up the Bills with a 61-yard walk-off field goal for Tyler Bass, a kicker who struggled all season long. Tua let a game-tying drive in this one. They played good football. Again, this is a team that's just not catching any breaks, no matter what they do. Raheem Mostert's finally getting some touches. I think that's a much-needed adjustment from this offense. Getting a big power back like Raheem Mostert, who can also break a couple runs, like we saw last season, in the lineup to go to pair with Achane and that offensive passing attack. There's still some work that's needed to do. Tyreek Hill has not really been on the same page with Tua and that Dolphins offense really all season long. Don't really know what's going on there, but this is a Miami Dolphins team that is playing much better football ever since Tua came back. They belong at number 22. The Jets to 21. They get, like we've been saying every single week since they last won, it was a must win, and they won. They came up big against a Texans team that I thought they had no shot against. Garrett Wilson comes up huge. We finally get vintage Aaron Rodgers for the first time on Thursday night. The question is whether or not they can keep this up. The schedule for the Jets, relatively easy down the stretch here. There's not too many tough games. Their division, not as tough as we expected it to be. They still have, two games coming up, one game coming up against the Bills, but they get the Cardinals, the Colts, the Seahawks, the Dolphins, the Jags, the Rams, the Bills, and the Dolphins to close it. That is a schedule that you can go on a bit of a run on. I'm not fully bought back into the Jets, but this is a team that I was fully in on this offseason, and if they can continue to win a couple games, play like they did, especially in that second half of this one, I believe in this team to make those adjustments, especially with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. At 20, it's the Bears. They are the biggest droppers of the week. They are down 9 spots from number 11, and this team, I don't know what's going on off the field, but this is now 2 weeks in a row where we have big controversies surrounding some of their bigger players. Tyreek Stevenson, obviously, last week. This week, DJ Moore giving up on the middle of the play. That's not it. They could not block the Arizona Cardinals, a defense that could not get any pressure on anybody else all season long. Giving up 6 sacks to the Cardinals, that's an awful, awful look. They need to play better than that. They need to play with more energy, and the Bears, I don't know what's going on in Chicago right now, but it feels like they are on a free fall to the bottom, back to where they expected to be at the beginning of the season. At 19, it's the Bengals. Joe Burrow coming out, and he's playing like an MVP level guy. We'll talk about midseason awards tomorrow, but Joe Burrow coming out there, threw for 5 touchdowns in this game against a bad Raiders team without T. Higgins. Joe, you had a team without a lot of contributions from Jamar Chase. This was a Joe Burrow moment, and he's keeping this team afloat. They're almost 500. They're not dead in the water yet, especially with the way that the AFC is kind of muddled in the middle. If they can make it to the playoffs the way that they started this season, they might be a team you don't want to go up against. At 18, it's the Broncos. Maybe I got a little high on this team. Maybe they're falling back down to earth. Bo Nix played a disgusting game against a really bad secondary. They only put up 10 points against the Ravens, a team that had let just about everybody else go wild through the air on them. Bo Nix couldn't get anything done. That Broncos defense gets absolutely torched against a really good offense. Didn't want to punish them too much for that, but this is a Broncos team that clearly has its issues. As good as they've been against the bad teams they play, whenever they play a real team like the Ravens, they come crashing back down to earth, and we all need to remember that until they beat a real team. Broncos at 18. And at 17, it's the Seahawks. They pushed the Rams to overtime. This was a must-win game for both of those teams. The Rams get out of there with the win, something that, again, both of these teams desperately, desperately needed. Seahawks have huge contributions from JSN. All 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. Geno Smith makes a couple of mistakes. They let the Rams come all the way back in this one, but it was still there were some things you really like out of the Seahawks in this one. Little worried about them. Again, kind of a litmus test for them, but they're here at 17. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we finish up our power rankings, ranked 16-1, coming up next after this break. Stick around on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, November 5th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the first half of our NFL Power Rankings. In this segment, we finish off our show with the second half, ranked 16-1. Find out who is at the top of the NFL Power Rankings in just 1 second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, November 5th. But like I was saying, we're going to finish off our NFL Power Rankings here, getting in to 16 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I caught some flack for this last week, the Pittsburgh Steelers at 16. They were on a bye week, didn't want to touch them, but I still stand by what I had to say. The Pittsburgh Steelers have yet to really play anybody in this season. They have a great start. They're playing good football. The additions of Preston Smith and Mike Williams should help them out a bit. I still need to see it to believe it with this Pittsburgh Steelers team. This is not a team that I think is really going to be any kind of real threat, and I don't know why people continue to put them in the top 10, to be completely honest with you. They're at number 16. At 15, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers showed me something last night, even shorthanded, even without any of their receivers. Receivers held to 2 catches until the final drive of the entire game for the Buccaneers. They were able to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Buccaneers were able to go out there against, in my opinion, the best defense in the NFL, in the Kansas City Chiefs, and stay toe-to-toe to them, force overtime. Arguably, should have gone for 2 there. I know I would have gone for 2 if I was if I were the Bucs in that situation. You know, hindsight is 20/20, right? You don't end up getting the coin toss, you end up losing. Whatever happens, that's just the way that it goes sometimes. I'm not going to question the decision too much, not what I would have done, but this is a Bucs team that really impressed me last night, especially defensively. They made a couple of big stops, sacked Patrick Mahomes a bunch of times, and you know, that's not something we had really seen out of this Bucs defense for the last couple of weeks. At 14, it's the Chargers, a team that I've definitely been too low on. I'm ready to start believing in this Chargers team, putting up a huge number against the Browns. This team just doesn't make mistakes, and if you let this team get a lead, they are not going to give it up, and that's the thing. A lot of NFL teams, if they get a lead, a 14-point lead, you don't always feel safe. With this Chargers team, if you let them get ahead of you, if you give them that inch of space, they're going to make it a mile, and that is what separates the good teams from the bad teams. The Chargers, still not a team that I think are fully there, but they have a lot of the pieces, and I think this is a Chargers team that if you let them, like I said, they will not let you back into the game. 13 goes to the Cardinals. I love the way this Cardinals defense has been playing. We saw them really show up against this Bears, holding them to the lowest point total of anybody this week, down to 9 points, and that can be put on a lot of things. The Bears offense didn't play particularly great. The Cardinals, on the other hand, have put out a lot of really good performances now. That's 3 straight games that they win, 2 on a game-winning field goal, but against good teams. The Bears, the Dolphins, the Chargers. These are all teams that we're looking at and we're saying they're not the greatest teams, but they're good teams. It's not like they're beating up on the Saints, the Raiders, the Panthers, these kind of teams, right? They're beating up against these teams that, you know, at least you say have a chance, have a little bit of a fight to maybe sneak in to the playoffs as like a 7 seed kind of situation. This is a Cardinals team I've been very impressed with, and I'm all the way back in on them. They're at number 13. At 12, it's the Falcons. And I think this is the line, 12 and higher, where you really get to see these like playoff contending teams. Nothing on the Cardinals, the Chargers, the Bucks, the Steelers, the Seahawks, the Broncos, these kind of teams that, you know, are a little bit lower than them on the power rankings. But I think the Falcons kind of start a whole nother tier. They're not Super Bowl contenders, but they're everyone from 12 and on. I would not be shocked if they made a run in the playoffs, if that makes sense. And the Falcons are on the edge of that. They're a team that when they play consistently, when they're on, when they get the run game going, when they get all their weapons available in the passing game, they're a team that can beat anybody. But that defense is the issue. The secondary that was supposed to be vaunted just has not played really smart defense. They've got a really good safety duo that just doesn't seem to communicate. The defense has not been all the way there. The offense is good enough to keep them in it. The Falcons are a team that I'm still a little worried about, but they're still in that would not be surprised if they made a run tier. At 11, it's the Rams. I've been trying to put you on game all season long. The Rams are a team that you should be afraid of. The Rams are a team that when they are healthy can compete with the best of them in the NFL. They finally get healthy. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp come back, and you see night and day in that offense. You see how effective Kyron Williams has become. He has a nose for the end zone like no one else that I have ever seen in this game of football. I swear to God, if he does not score a touchdown in every single game, if he doesn't score a touchdown in a game, I think the sky is falling down. That's how good he is at finding the end zone. The Los Angeles Rams just miss out on the top 10, but this is their highest rank of the season. They're up to number 11, and this is a Rams team that I think is really, really dangerous as we get down the stretch. At number 10 is the Texans, a very disappointing loss to the Jets. They're really banged up. This is the lowest they've been all year on our power rankings. This is still a team I believe in. That offensive line, I really thought they would try and I really thought this is a team that would try and get some help on the offensive line. We saw the Vikings go out and get a Cam Robinson. We saw some moves being made at the deadline. They ended up standing pat. They'll get Nico Collins back soon, and that's going to be a big get. But the Texans are a team that just quite aren't there when it comes to Super Bowl contention. They're still a really good team, and any given week, they could beat the brakes off of anybody. At 9, it's the Niners. The Niners up a spot to number 9 in a bye week. A big week for them. They get Christian McCaffrey back. And that's something that I'm going to hold off any hope for. But this is a team at number 9 that I think is a real threat in the NFC again. They've hung around. They've just done enough of a job to hang around while waiting for McCaffrey to come back. I think he completely transforms that offense. And I think we get to see the San Francisco 49ers that we saw last season and the season before once he comes back. At 8, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. How many times have we gone over this with the Eagles? When they play clean football, they are awesome. Nick Sirianni is going to coach this team out of a couple of wins every single week. He left 8 points on the board in this game because of bad decisions, because of bad play calls, because of decisions when you're going for 2 instead of going for 1. This is going to be an issue later on, but for now, when they're playing the Jaguars, it's fine. This is an Eagles team with so much talent that they can just beat up on anybody, but they need to fix those decisions. They need to make better decisions, and Nick Sirianni needs to figure that out now before it bites them in the butt later on this season. At 7, it's the Commanders. How about Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders? They go out there, they sweep the Giants. Doesn't sound like a big accomplishment, but they have not done that in forever. This is a team that's kind of been the Achilles heel for the Commanders. The Giants have really the only team that Daniel Jones has been successful against, but they go out there, they play a really good football game. Situational football is awesome for this team. The Washington Commanders make a move to be buyers at the deadline. I can't remember the last time that happened. The Commanders are on the up and up, and that Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels connection is so much fun to watch. At number 6, it's the Vikings. They played a sloppy game, but they were able to escape with a win on Sunday Night Football, a game that they needed after dropping 2 in a row. This was a get-right game for them, and it didn't look really right, but still, Sam Darnold escapes with a win. The Minnesota Vikings still better than just about everybody else in the sport right now. Still not 100% convinced about them, though. And as we enter the top 5 here, I think there is a pretty clear divide between these top 5 teams and everybody else in the league. I drew another line at 12. 5 is where I think that next line comes. These top 5 teams, I think, are the Super Bowl contending teams, the teams that I think should be the teams that people pick to go to the Super Bowl right now. Just these 5. At number 5, it's the Packers. They're coming off of a brutal loss. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. A brutal loss to the Lions. Jordan Love played his worst football game. He's a little bit hurt, but he is a guy that's a gunslinger. You're going to get some of those games. He hasn't made a lot of those mistakes all season long. This is a Packers team, especially with the way that defense is playing. Holding the Lions to just 24 points is a success. And if you take away that defensive touchdown, holding them to just 17 points is crazy. Holding that Lions team under 20 points offensively is a great look for that Packers defense. And this is a Packers team that I think people are sleeping on a little bit, especially because of how bad they kind of looked in that game. But still, this is a Packers team I think deserves a lot more respect than they're getting right now, and they're at number 5. At number 4, it's the Buffalo Bills. They have run away with that division, and outside of them in the AFC, there's not many teams that I think you can talk about being true contenders. Right now, the NFC has been that top tier, which is not really what we expected. There's a couple teams in the AFC, but the Bills, the way they're playing, that running game, Josh Allen playing like an MVP right now, they are the number 4 team in the league. And they're just slightly behind the top 3, which again, I'm going to draw another line at the top 3 here. There's another separating line. We got line 12-6, line 5-4, line 3-1. That's what we're looking at right now when we're talking about the tiers as far as contenders go in the league. And that takes us to the first of my top 3 contenders, the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson are a team that you do not want to see in the playoff. This is a team that is built for playoff football. We talk about all the time about how physical playoff football is. And if you talk about this Ravens team with that combo of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and Zay Flowers going for 100 yards every single first half, we have to figure out what's going on in that second half. In the second half, they just run the ball with Derrick Henry and grind it down, which is why he doesn't really do anything in the second half there, but this is a Ravens team that has seemingly found a formula. They'll play down to their opponents sometimes, but this is a Ravens team that you do not want to see in the playoffs. They are number 3. Number 2 is the Lions. The Lions come off their first ever game outside this season, which is crazy, and they play in the elements, the toughest elements that teams have had to play in all season long, I think, and they still come out there, they do their job. Jared Goff, very efficient. He just simply doesn't throw incompletions. 30 for 30 in his last 30 throws when targeting Amon-Ra St. Brown. He catches another touchdown. That run game is dangerous, and you're starting to see a theme with these top teams. They all have that run game. Derrick Henry, that backfield duo, Sonic and Knuckles in Detroit. We're starting to see a transition as more and more teams go to those 2 high looks. If you can run the ball, you are going to be a very successful team. But of course, it doesn't matter because the number 1 team are the Kansas City Chiefs. They get DeAndre Hopkins and immediately they look better. I told you a million times, I'll tell it to you again, this Chiefs defense is the best in football. The way that linebacker core plays, especially against the run, they do not let people run on them. They are able to play that 2 high cover shell with that and not let the run go. That is insane. That is not a normal thing you're supposed to be able to do, and no one has been able to run on the Chiefs all season long. They add DeAndre Hopkins. He catches 2 touchdowns. They're only getting better. Patrick Mahomes is only getting better. He really struggled through the first half of the season. I am scared to think what this team will do when they finally figure that offense out, and right now they are on track for that. The Chiefs, number 1 still. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts of my power rankings. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Go relax. Go pay attention to things going on in the world. It is a big night, not just in sports, but, obviously around the world. I will be back same time tomorrow talking about the college football playoff committee and their rankings. We're going to do mid-season awards for the NFL Rookie Report, and much more. So make sure you tune in for that. We'll be back same time, same place then. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. You have been listening to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Appreciate all of you. You have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.